Hello and welcome to Movie of the Year, the only podcast on the internet with the science and the screaming to determine what is the single greatest movie of any given year. And this is another bonus episode, one that you don't even have to pay for. My name is Ryan, and I will be your host for this evening's show. And tonight is a little film I like to call, and most people like to call, Picnic at Hanging Rock. Or if you have an accent, Picnic at Hanging Rock. Like I said, my name is Ryan. With me, as almost always, is Greg.
Almost always, Ryan. So glad to be on this free show. Free for the people.
For 75, I think you missed a horror movie and Solo. Those are the ones that you opted out
but I
on.
did watch Shallow Hal to make up for it.
And did it?
No, it was horrifying, so maybe, yeah, I guess so, yeah.
And also, our returning champ, it's Van.
Hi, good to be back.
Sweet. Now, let's start with the movie really quick. I don't know what else we would start with. Picnic at Hanging Rock. We're going to get to what it's about, but I do want to know your guys' generic feelings on it. First of all, had you guys heard of this movie before we were assigned this movie by the board?
Absolutely not.
I can remember. Okay, Ryan, help me out here. So this is the 75 version, but was there a remake in like the 90s?
There was a remake a couple years ago.
The Amazon show?
Yeah, where Natalie Dormer from Game of Thrones played the school marm.
Yeah.
And not one of the students, which I was surprised to find out.
So I guess I heard about Picnic at Hanging Rock. Like, I think I heard about it on Siskel and Ebert, but obviously they must have just been talking about movies that they liked from back in the day, because I was not alive in 75, as we've established. But I was always intrigued. Yeah, no, Van, I can assure you I was not. It's
important to note we were not alive in 1975.
Just barely.
I'll take your word for it.
You should tell your face. But I had heard of the movie, and I was intrigued by it because it was like, it's mysterious, and people go missing. And so I was always intrigued by it. And then when we were doing 75, I got really into the idea of watching it. And so I watched it sort of before the season started.
Okay. And Van, we'll start with you. What are our initial reactions before we dive in?
It's like a painting. The cinematography and the scene dressing, it's a beautiful movie. It looks like a Renaissance painting. It looks like an old-timey, like the entire film from beginning to end is put together like, I can't stop saying it enough, a painting. It's really pretty.
Which, this is our second movie of the season like that. We also did Barry Lyndon, which is, I think, more forcefully a painting. This is, I would say, if you took a painting but also added the word dream. Greg?
I would agree.
Yeah, like real soft focus, like real hazy lighting.
They literally put a bridal veil over the camera for a lot of it.
I love it.
Is that how they got that effect?
For a lot of it, yeah.
It's so weird. It's so disquieting. It really defies sort of like any genre, necessarily one versus another. You're left with way more questions than answers. It's very provoking. It's a super provoking, very interesting movie. And I think by not providing a ton of answers, it doesn't foreclose any meanings. And so then it feels like a very rich text, because so many things within it are possible, because it's not constrained by telling you exactly what happened. You don't know what happened, and it's kind of a movie very much dealing with like, how do we feel about not knowing what happened? Like, can we experience the unknown and really abide it?
There's that, but there's also like, when you tell me what you think, like when we all tell each other what we think happened or what the movie's about, like we get to judge each other. Like, what was your first reaction? And that sort of tells you a lot about who you are. I would like, this felt like an art house film, but I would say that I enjoyed it a lot more over the last couple of days than I did while watching it. Was this a tough get through?
Not for me. I really liked how weird and out there it was. Every time it like just cut to an ominous like shot of the rock with like a weird warbling sound, I was just like, yes, awesome. That rock is scary and weird.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and then watching like people do the searching and kind of be really bad at it. Like, as much as people were dedicated to finding these girls for a while, they kind of did a half-assed job. Like go like halfway down the cave and just be like, hello, and then just like walk away. Like, now they're probably not in there. Yeah.
Did you guys think that they had such a problem with the girls not coming back? Because in Australia, like, that's what things do.
Things
like,
always
if you
come
throw
back.
Them, they come back to you, and the girls never came back to them. So,
Well, I thought it was...
Dan, were you...
Sorry?
Go ahead.
I thought it was a really easy watch because I lost track of time. I think from the get-go, they make it very clear that time is a very relative sense in this movie. It doesn't have very strong groundings.
Did your watch stop?
Yes, it did. Right at noon, actually.
Right at noon. Now that's creepy.
Yeah.
Do you guys think it was weird that they showed a UFO floating above everyone the entire time? Okay, that's not true. What is true is the first question, which is coming up after this break. Hey guys, thank you so much for listening so far. And let me just tell you that everything ahead of this commercial is much better than what came before it. That's my guarantee. While I have you here, let me tell you about a website. It's called yourpopfilter.com. And it's everything you need that's related to Pop Filter. Everything Mike, everything Ryan, everything Greg, everything Cassie, everything is there at yourpopfilter.com. While you're there, go to yourpopfilter.com/Amazon. Make that your new Amazon bookmark and do your shopping from there. That way, we get a little piece of the action and Amazon doesn't. Make sure you're also listening to everything that Pop Filter has to offer, which includes the Superhero Show, a podcast that covers every single TV show that's based on a comic book or comic book property, and Movie of the Year, where we sit down and try and figure out what is the single greatest movie of any given year. That's Superhero Show, that's Movie of the Year, and that's yourpopfilter.com. Rate, subscribe, review, bye! After making his first movie in 1974, a horror movie about killer cars called The Cars Who Ate Paris, Peter Weir elevated his game a bit by adapting the 1967 novel Picnic at Hanging Rock by Joan Lindsay. Adapting the version without the infamous 18th chapter, the movie tells the story of a group of Australian schoolgirls who go on an outing to an infamous rock in the year 1900, which sounds like it's in the future, but it was actually a long time ago. A group of girls ventures off on their own, but then something happens. 3 of the girls and 1 of the teachers go missing. This causes the school and the community to have an absolute meltdown. Eventually, 1 of the girls is found, but that does little to bring normalcy back to the school. After a small reaction in 75, the movie has gone on to become something of a classic and kickstarted the Australian New Wave, which featured such filmmakers as George Miller, Gillian Armstrong, and Bruce Beresford, and lasted until Crocodile Dundee made us remember that it's actually a big, annoying island full of criminals. Taste buds, let's start with one of the reasons this movie stands out as the most anomalous movies of the entire 1975 season. It features women. Picnic at Hanging Rock might have the least amount of nudity in film history, but is what's naked important? What is Weir doing with the sexuality, or lack thereof, of these young women and their mentors?
So, my first thought, lesbians. Frankly, there's a lot of undertone. There's some very intense undertones, actually, of sexuality in this film, and you see this within the older women as well as the young college students, the students of the college there. Although they do seem very, very young. That is my one thought there. There's something about repressed feminine sexuality, the need to break free, sort of with them just going off in the distance. They truly do not give an answer for what happens with these girls. They just exit. They break free, they leave, they disappear, they become invisible, however you want to take it. I feel like there's some kind of metaphor you can draw between them leaving and their, the undertones of sexuality within this film.
I mean, we could start off with, and again, there are no answers, so we're just going to play around with this kind of stuff, but some sort of puberty or orgasm or falling in love with each other that then now we no longer have need for the school, so bye-bye. We have now exploded, much like the volcano they constantly reference, and we're out. We're not going to be shut down by this school anymore.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, they go somewhere. Where do young women go? We sort of see so many.
I'm gonna clip that off. By the way. That's gonna be of just Greg's asking, where do young women
go? Those versions of ourselves disappear in the same way that that these young women disappear, right? Like they are so young and naive at the beginning of the movie, and that's not going to be a state that persists very long in their life, and they live in this very insular world of other young women their age, and they like play at romance and celebrate romance. And I think in that milieu, there's also like honest homoerotic and lesbian love, but there's also just like the playing at love, and this is what it would be like to get Valentines from somebody, and this is what it's like to dream of love. But there is then also like a reality to maturation. There is like a reality to becoming an adult, and you go beyond the veil, you disappear, and you can't really transmit back to those girls who you've left behind what has transpired and what has changed in you and where you've gone. So I think that like the sort of thematic connection that you can make towards just like sexual maturity or entering the sexual world or learning the secrets of the adult world, that I think is way more important than like coming up with some like, okay, a portal opens up and they go through it. And I've read the book and I've read the last chapter of what happens, and you still come away from reading the last chapter that details exactly what happens. You still come away from it being like, but wait, what happened? Like, why did...
So what is that last chapter?
It's like you get to the very end of the book, and then it's like, okay, so what happened was they were going up the rock, and a portal opened up in space, and
you literally meant portal.
Yeah, and Miss McGraw comes running up, and she like throws off her bustle, she throws off her corset, and it floats in the air. It just like hovers for a while, and then she starts saying all this stuff about the universe, stuff that's like similar to what the girls say earlier in the movie. And then she turns into a crab. She literally turns into a crab, and then she goes like she scuttles through the hole, and then Miranda goes, and two of the others go, but then one of them, Marion, the one that comes back, Irma, she gets shot out and she can't get back in, and that's why her hands are all beat up, because she's like clawing at the thing, like, and so. But you might still have the question, like, why did that portal open up? Why did Miss McCraw
what does that portal
turn into a crab?
Yeah,
like, it doesn't really...
It's like answers in all the wrong ways, but none of the right ways, the satisfying ways. The one thing that I didn't read the book or the chapter, but I read about it, which is basically the same thing. And she had this chapter ripped out of the book by the editor before it got published. And then liked the book more. She believed it when people said it's actually a lot better. And then, but like, later on, she was like, well, I wrote it, though, so people should still read it, and then released it. One of the things that I do like about it that I think speaks to this is how the portal is described is that it's very much not a hole, And I think this speaks to the feminine aspects of it, is that it's not, although it's a, like, you can go into it, it's not the absence of something, Like, it's not, it's the hole is in itself a thing as well, And I think so often these movies, basically not just 75, but everything before 75, if you're a woman, it's the absence of something, like you have you have this, you're less than a normal person. And the movie seems to keep that point from the final chapter of, although it's a whole, it's not, it's its actual own different thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the film I think the author was wise in ripping out that last chapter, and because I particularly like the image of the cliffs, and we know that Sarah winds up dead at the bottom of the cliffs, having presumed that she jumped off, committed suicide somehow there, and again returning back to the ominous cliffs, just there. That's sort of representative of a hole, but it's not a hole. It's cliffs. It's so many different things. It's caverns and caves on the inside, or possible danger on the outside. It's so much more than just like a cliff.
Yeah, and it's kind of like like a synthesis of the masculine and the feminine together, because it is shot, especially in the movie, it's shot in like a very I would say like masculine way, but at the same time, as you said, Van, it's like all crevices and interior spaces as well. And I think that it, like, that's one of the levels in which the movie is playing with gender, is that Hanging Rock is kind of both things at the same time.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the camera work there, actually, when, you've got the people rescuing or coming upon these bodies in the caverns, and you get this high up, like, down angle, as if you're in, like, looking down upon a scene, just like the girls were looking down as, like, ants within a colony that didn't know they were in a colony, that sort of metaphor that they were playing on earlier. So I really enjoyed the camera work of this film.
So we talked a lot about how this does represent all people, hitting that adult age, but I want to bring specifically the Victorian aspect to it. These girls, my favorite line of the movie is, "You're going up the hill without your shoes," and she screams because it's just the biggest deal just to have bare feet. What is Peter Weir doing with making sure that we focus on this time period, these clothes, this type of school?
Well, I think when you the sort of absurdity of when you get through town, you can take off your gloves, and the girls are like, yes, like as soon as they get through town, they're like, boom, gonna bust these gloves off. The absolute constant need to be swaddled and covered every inch to be protected from not just the poisonous ants and lizards, but just even the look of men. And when they go through town, honestly, young boys run alongside the coach, and men,
they're so exotic,
and men whistle at them. And then when they're by Hanging Rock, Albert actually whistles at the girls again. So I think that just the sort of ultimate fixation of their purity to the point that when the girls go missing for a little bit, a doctor has to check to see if they've had any sort of sexual interaction with somebody. So that means that if you just go missing, then a doctor is going to inspect you in that way. So nothing did happen to you until this weird, creepy older man checked to make sure that nothing had happened to you. And I think that sort of fixation on their purity is very emblematic of the Victorian era and the way in which it forced the kind of sexual trauma on people that it was meant to maybe be protecting them from.
And yeah, it was it's nothing did happen to me until just now when the doctor came over.
And then everybody talked about it, The doctor was like, "Don't worry, I inspected her." And it seems like that's a huge violation.
Yeah, you don't see a lot of middle ground here. You see either the beautiful, picturesque idea of a girl and then her dead on the ground too. You get to see one side or the other. There's absolutely no middle ground to walk there.
The other thing too about the clothes is that it's almost, I know it's traditional, and it was a tradition that I hope was dying at this point, but there's a sort of binding to it. We're going to keep you from growing, by putting you in all these tight clothes. You don't get to make any decisions for yourself. And also, is this even a school? I know it says that out front, but are they learning stuff that is actually important at this school?
I mean, I'm just remembering when Sarah was tied up in a posture corrector, which looked ominous, to say the least. Kind of imagine Hannibal Lecter being strapped to his chair as he's being wheeled out. So that was where I had sort of the idea that this is more of an abusive finishing school. Someplace they send women who don't exactly fit in or need training or fixing up or something like that, because it looks like a dungeon in a finishing.
Yeah, that scene is great because we don't even know she's there for the first half of the scene, and then she's like, "Hello." But yeah, it's a place that dads send daughters when they start to get nervous about them. So you take care of them. I don't care what sort of abuse happens.
It's like a holding pen.
Sure. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I don't know how much. I know there's a French teacher, but I don't know how much collegiate academic work they're doing. It seems just here's how we get you from father to husband.
Yeah, they're supposed to learn manners.
I think they mentioned math.
Yeah, rudimentary math. So I guess some geology that the Mr.
They love rocks, don't they?
They're into rocks. But yeah, that I think is way less important than that you went to a school like this and then you have it on your transcript.
Is the movie sexy? We're going to get to genre next, but is the movie sexy? Is it anti-sexy? Is he using a magnifying glass, or is he trying to sort of get you to look without you knowing it? We're going to talk about Weir soon, but just as far as female sexuality goes, where do we put Weir?
I wouldn't put him on I don't see him being very high up on that scale there. I mean, I'm thinking of his other works as well. The one with Robin Williams, that I'm forgetting the name of, Dead Poets Society. That was Weir, if I remember correctly. And even in a movie that's, I feel like, much more charged like that, or the subject matter is a lot more blatant in terms of, they're just more, they bring it to the attention, they bring it to the screen's attention much more. I don't see him as being very overtly sexual.
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't foreground it really in any movie. I mean, you have to add it there, whether it's like Master and Commander, which you could do some work on your own, but it's not like Truman Show. Witness takes place in an Amish camp, and there is a sex scene, but it's Amishy. Like he is not. This is not a concern of his. It seems weird that a guy would direct this movie, and I know only guys were allowed to direct movies in '75. But did he creep you out, or did it make any difference that it was a dude?
I didn't think so, because it seems like it is about sex without really dealing with sex very much. It's like sort of about the implications of learning about sex, but then that is like obscured because it's really about hanging rock. So it's kind of like about the subject matter without being about it, and that made it a lot less creepy, because I think that male directors can really stumble when trying to like get into this headspace of like, female lesbian love, like really like, oh no, I'm just going to take my understanding of that and bring it to the screen. And I think he instead like sort of just stands back and doesn't try to do that. And that's probably a better move. Like, we understand it to be there without his trying to do too much with it.
Or we can sort of pick and choose how much we want it to be there when he's not in our face with it. Yeah, I mean, like, it's certainly about, like, Sarah is in love with Miranda. A lot of the girls, like, have a flirtatious air with each other. But obviously, there's no way to understand the story other than Sarah is heartbroken because the person that she's in love with suddenly disappears and she doesn't know how to exist anymore without that person. But you don't have to do much with the sexuality there because everybody's, like, a kid in this story anyway. And I think that, it is a lot better for the movie to do it the way he handled it. Okay, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we'll get into another aspect of the movie.
Well, that is very, very funny. Or very sad, and perhaps now you have something to think about. Or very problematic, and perhaps we have something to think about. But in any event, I'm sure you have some reaction to what you're listening to. So why not check us out on the social media? You can go to Instagram or Twitter and find us at YourPopFilter. Email contacts@YourPopFilter. Hey, everybody, keep watching them movies.
How is Peter Weir playing with our expectations of genre as far as women's pictures go, which is what they used to call them in classic Hollywood, movies about women, for women. And then we'll go further to say mystery movies, horror movies, etc.
So there's a concept called femme noir that was created in the 40s and 50s where it was noirs that were about women and somehow created by or produced by or written by women as well, and that's when you started to see more female main characters. Now, a lot of these main characters were homemakers, they were wives, they were little girls, and they were princesses waiting to be married off to some random strange man. But what I find interesting is that this film is a mystery. It's a thriller, is how I would sort of describe the genre here. And that was never marketed to women, but audiences within the 60s, 70s, and 80s, female audiences loved drama. They loved crime thrillers. They funded crime thrillers, and why they were in, like, the pictures all the time, why they could go to the cinema and see them, because women were just love them. And it was interesting for me to see how Weir used both, like, the traditional sort of younger girl, like, main characters who were generally seen as harmless, or they're usually the object of male affection during this time period, and incorporating them into a thriller, which that, you didn't really see too many women wrapped up in thrillers here, and having that sort of juxtaposition of the expectations of what the genre would bring in this film.
There was that thing that went on then that's still going on now, where if there was a big hit, let's say a mystery movie about a woman, maybe even made by women, was a big hit with women, then you just say, oh, that was a one-off. That was, that was a mistake.
Yeah.
We don't know how that happened. Let's literally never try it again. And so then we just have this very spotted history with this kind of stuff. If you saw a trailer for this movie, though, it would seem like the least thrilling thriller of all time, and yet it is a thriller. How? How does he do it?
Well, that's, I think, part of the marrying of the genres, because part of the way in which it sort of departs from being a thriller sometimes is that there's this weird sort of like lack of sticking with trying to figure out what happened to these girls. And what happens is the farther away that most people get from the incident, the less they think about it. And so it's this weird mix where most people just go back to living their normal lives. And so the way that both Weir and Lindsay, who wrote the book, the way she was able to do that is it sometimes becomes almost like a Jane Austen book for a while. It's about people at garden parties. It's about people at this finishing school. And then it's like, oh, and by the way, one of them just like got spat back out the portal and she's around again. And then everybody has to confront the fact that, like, oh, crap, yeah, we stopped thinking about that, but that thing seriously did happen. And then so it becomes kind of like a thriller again.
This is an obscure reference, or it's a tiny one, but what you're saying, Greg, reminds me of the scene in Ghostbusters where Rick Moranis, fully possessed, runs up to a restaurant window and starts banging on it. And they all stop and say, that's the fucking craziest thing that we have ever seen. And then 10 seconds later, they go directly back to eating. Like, we can't actually deal with what happened, right? So we just have to go back to our normal lives.
Yeah, like when something unexplainable happens and somebody goes, multiple somebodies go missing as a result of it, your options are to become obsessed with it and to go completely crazy being like, this can't be. How can someone be here one moment and then just not here the next? Or your other option is to go do an equally crazy thing and be like, yup, sometimes people disappear. Okay, back to life. And most people choose to do the second, but a couple people just can't ever get over the fact that something really weird happened, and they become obsessed with it forever. And Van, it's so interesting what you said about like femme noir, because the idea that somebody had the bright idea to tap into like women loving, noir stories. Well, now we know, like, true crime podcasts,
the world of podcasts,
are completely buoyed by. Like it's all.
I'm one of them.
Yeah, it's all women who want to hear about the murder of the week. And so, yeah, of course, there is that built-in audience for it, and that's just proof that the marrying of these two concepts really is such a good marriage here of young women go missing, and then also having the just like looking at the affairs of young women and the truth of going from a young woman to an adult.
Absolutely, yeah. You see, I just sort of think that, if there's ever expectations placed upon one group of people, that group of people is going to be more drawn towards film and media that subvert those expectations. And I think you see this all kind of wrapped up in one. And I loved how you said it was like Jane Austen-esque, because that's what I was thinking as well. I was thinking it's just women watching other women do women things, which was such a revolutionary idea at the time.
I read an interview with Peter Weir who said he studied, and this is his second movie, and his first one was like some B car horror movie. I say that like that's a normal genre. He studied this way, like, to create a pattern in the movie, or to have this like reverberation that would manipulate people into constantly forgetting about the crime.
Yeah,
like I want to write it and also edit it in such a way where it just feels like this pacing that constantly makes you forget. And that's such a dangerous idea. Like, if you were a studio exec, you'd be like, absolutely do not do that. That's going to ruin the entire thing. What were other ways that he kept the movie afloat by making the mystery not a mystery, by making the thriller not thrilling?
I think by just having more mundane concerns, come into the world. And that is really how we go about forgetting, is that the more mundane things in the world come and attract our attention. So we kind of get caught up in, oh man, people are like dropping out of this school. And we spend a lot of time with Mrs. Appleyard, and we get like, oh man, the administration of this school is difficult. Or we spend a little time with the cop, Bumfer, And it's like, yeah, figuring this out is really like dragging this guy down. Or we spend time with Birdie and what's the rich kid's name? Michael. And we're like, wait, are these guys vibing? What's going on here? And then it's only through that relationship are we kind of brought back into it, because Michael wants to go back to the Rock. But it does such a good job of mirroring what's going on in this universe, which is people are just deciding not to really think about this after the initial sensational news, and it no longer has that like newness to it. People just get over it and they don't want to think about it anymore.
They realize life goes on and they don't know how to cope with that, so they just move on.
What else can you say about it after like, yeah, it's crazy, 3 of them just disappeared?
I mean, I watched this entire country find out that there's life on other planets and then not give a fuck within 12 hours.
Yeah.
But, like, and then, yeah.
The UFO report?
Yeah, your own personal stuff. Like, these girls disappeared, but I just got this new video game I'm excited about. And eventually one will outweigh the other. The other thing, too, is that pattern, that reverberation that he set in, it changes your expectations almost immediately of what this movie is going to deliver. And if it works, if it gets you on its wavelength, then you're fine with watching all the things that Greg just listed. You know, you're like, oh, this is not an Alex Cross movie or a David Fincher procedural. You know, this is just it's like slice of life. It's almost like Richard Linklater, but we have this possible portal in the mountain. You know, you get to have all those things at once, which is crazy. The other thing that genres always come down to is music. There's a lot going on with the music in this movie. When does it work? How does it work? Like, somebody describe the music to me, and then are there times where the music might be a bit too much?
It's a low, warbling background ambiance.
That's when
that
it works.
Just kind of swells. Yes, right? Like when the nature, like, and the scenic, like, just the girls going about their daily lives, but it's just the ominous music in the background. That's when it's good.
In the book, it's always described as that, like, Hanging Rock is kind of like a presence for everybody, even when they're not like near it, and that warbling does a good job of that. And like, I think that even if no one tells you there's a portal in this story, I think you kind of know that there is, and that warbling is kind of the sound that it makes.
Yeah, I mean, there's like a magnetic pull. It stops watches, and so it's halfway in between music and like sci-fi.
Yeah.
Basically.
And so I think that definitely works. That's like, I wish that had kind of been all of the music. But then it was 75, so there was like these like little pin whistles, like piccolos. That part of the soundtrack I hated. But then on top of that, there was a very 70s, like kind of like rock opera, like big grand piano and like super dramatic soundtrack, and I liked that one too. So there's like 3 or 4 different kind of soundtracks for this, and some of them work, some of them don't, but I think having a mix helps you like sort of jump from genre to genre and keeps the viewer sort of aware of what level of reality we're in at any one time. Like, are we thinking about Hanging Rock? That's the warble. Are we thinking about saving the girls? That's the dramatic music. Are the girls gonna disappear soon? That's like the weird whistly stuff.
And everything to me about this movie is like brings up the word classical, you know, and classic music has those sort of like motifs that come in and out, just like the music in here does. But it's less catchy. It's less worried about like, do we have a hook? I mean, you know, like this movie is not worried about its hook.
The story basically is what would happen if in a Jane Austen book, a black hole opened up. And I think that the music does a really good job of capturing all those different vibes at the same time.
Okay, let's take one last break. And when we come back, let's talk about that ending.
Hola, Filterinos. I just wanted to interrupt real briefly and say thank you for listening. Thank you for your support. If you want to support us a little more directly, you can go to patreon.com/yourpopfilter. There, depending on what tier you pick, $1 a month, $5 a month. If you're crazy, anything more than $5 a month, don't do that. You can get extra content. There's extra shows, extra series, behind-the-scenes stuff. You could pay for Ryan to draw you a picture. I can write you a poem. You can get the shirts off our very own backs. All of that and so much more over at patreon.com/yourpopfilter. While you're on the internet, you should check out Shady Monk. He does all the tunes you've been listening to. He's on Bandcamp. He's on Spotify, SoundCloud, wherever kids get their music these days that I'm too old to know. Shady Monk lives there. You can probably follow him on Twitter and Instagram as well. That's Shady Monk. Wherever you get music, check him out.
The ending is such a vital part of this movie. Or maybe the lack thereof is sort of a vital part. The central question of what exactly happens at Hanging Rock is never resolved. How did this leave you as a viewer? Greg, you knew about the reputation. You knew, maybe you and I went in knowing that, like, the mystery is a mystery. Audiences in 1975 did not know that, and Van did not know that. And they were upset. Van, were you upset?
I wasn't upset. I got frustrated. I would say end of the first act, into the second act. I was just like, okay, so this is a crime drama. We need to be moving forward, or we're not going to get anywhere. And in the
Where is
last
Ice-T?
bit,
Why is Ice-T not asking people?
Exactly. So yeah, I'm used to SVU for sure, and the original Law and Order franchise. I was ready for the next thing to come up, and it just didn't. And then I stopped caring by the end of it, and I think I became okay with. I think I realized along the way, oh, they're just not going to tell us, and I was all right with that.
I think I got the gist based on what I heard on Siskel and Ebert that there was going to probably be more questions than answers. And I would say within the first 20 minutes of the movie, you can tell it's so weird and ethereal. If you think that you're going to get answers in this movie, then you're just not watching it correctly. It's obviously, and I think also, what answer is satisfying? When will you ever be done?
It's not a portal with people turning into crabs, I will tell you that.
Yeah, right? Like that.
There's no good answer.
Yeah, exactly. But the mystery is what's interesting. The mystery and watching people react to it, because that's what the movie is about. It's about how people react to something like this. And so that's the part that it draws you to it. But you're always going to, when you leave something open-ended, you're always going to have audience members who are just like, no, I don't like that. You have to tell me what happened.
I read a story about a critic screening, and one of the critics at the end threw his cup of coffee at the screen and said that this is bullshit that we didn't get an answer.
He needs to calm down.
Sort of.
Yeah.
Well, first, yeah, coffee wasn't $5 a cup back then, so it was fine. But he almost reacted like the girls did when Irma was coming back to say goodbye, and she didn't have any answers for them either. And if I was Peter Weir hearing this coffee throwing story, I'd be like, yeah, I did it, bitches. Like, this is the exact response I wanted for you, and you fell directly into my trap.
Well, think of what's gone on with COVID and people's reaction to the experts, the quote experts about COVID. COVID, something has only existed for such a short time, and the experts are like, okay, our new understanding means this, and people get furious with them. Like, why can't you just tell me what I need to do? Why do you keep switching the guidance? Because we're just studying this thing. We don't know how it works. But when people can't give you an answer, you get pissed off with them. And that's exactly what happens when Irma comes back, is she has nothing for them. She can't tell them why she came back, and she can't tell them why it's her and not Miranda. Miranda is the star of the school. Everybody loves Miranda. She's the center of the universe. If anyone's going to come back, it has to be Miranda. It can't be randomly one of the other girls. And the fact that one of them pops back up and she has nothing to say, she either won't say what happened or can't remember or just can't articulate it. And honestly, it doesn't even give an indication of which of those things it is. When she thinks about it, she breaks down crying, so she is upset by it, but she can't say anything about it. And then that transplants her in people's minds from being a victim of it to being some sort of to being in on it or something.
Yeah,
and they get so upset with her.
We don't know how, but you're pulling our strings, And that's the doctor.
You are the one denying us. You know what the answer is, even if you can't access it, and you won't tell us what it is, and we're pissed off. And so the audience feels that too. Like, movie, and the truth of the matter is, sometimes as an artist, you create something and you don't know its parameters. Mm-hmm. You don't know what the answer is. Now, it turns out that she did have an idea of what happened, but sometimes you can't say what it is, because if you're trying to have there be some weird spatial anomaly that nobody's ever heard of, well, then obviously you can't define it fully, because it's not something that it's not something that humans can even fathom. So the artist herself can't fathom it. Peter Weir himself can't fathom it.
Yeah, I mean, looking back at old texts, even from the 30s and 40s, Agatha Christie as well, her mysteries, no matter how intense and how crazy, always had a very logical method about Sherlock Holmes. You always, there's a logic to getting to the end, and there is always an answer, because you start out with a question, you know you're going to get an answer by the end of the book. And I feel like with this, Weir just decided, no, you're not going to get it. He cut 7 minutes of the film out, I think, from what I remember.
Yeah,
just reading up
he was
about it.
I want a director's cut. I want the Weir cut. I'm going to take shit out, and that is unheard of. That is unheard of. The other thing too with even the greats like Christie or Doyle rely, and definitely the less greats as we get into the 70s and 80s as far as mysteries go, they rely on this, I preternaturally saw this thing, or I accidentally, coincidentally saw this thing that solves the mystery. And that's part of what leaves it so unsatisfying. You have to have something like that in there with mysteries like this, because the vast majority of mysteries never get solved, or detective cases or whatever. This is so much more realistic, if not philosophical, so much more realistic about what happens when people go missing, Yeah,
I mean, that's why everyone's heard of John Benet Ramsey and all of these unsolved cases, and, not as much the solved ones.
Yeah, I mean, the story of someone goes missing and nobody ever knows what happened, that is a common story. It's a lot more rare to come in and be able to definitively say, hey, this is what happened. And now we live in an era where we get a lot of that, because DNA evidence can really do a good job of pointing the finger at someone who's guilty. And that's, we've had big case breakthroughs just because of Ancestry.com, or the my 23andMe, there you go. Yeah. But for the vast history of humankind, when there's a crime, there's almost no way to tell what happened here.
Not that we're saying that people should go commit crimes, but you probably won't get caught if you do.
But if it's a cool enough crime to where everybody hears about it, I don't know. That's something. It's wrong still, but it's a something.
I feel like you could have gotten away with a lot more pre-1980, but post-1980, too many security cameras, too many new DNA, systems and all that.
But in 1900, man, go crazy.
Oh yeah, go crazy.
I mean, the guy investigating the case is his last name is Bumfer. He's basically asking his wife what the scuttlebutt is so that he can maybe crack the case that way. What are people saying out there anyway?
We did talk a lot about the two dudes in the movie, but he asked the blonde of the two dudes, did you do this? And he's like, nope. And he's like, all right, good enough for me. And the guy's like, I swear to God I didn't. And he was like, no, it's fine. I get it.
And honestly,
I believe
when this still felt more like a detective story, I was like, okay, well, that guy did it, obviously. He's like, then I saw 3 girls, 4 girls, 3 girls, whatever. And then he just seems so flustered. It's like, okay, this guy's guilty. He knows something.
I'm going to write down 3.5 and we'll call it a day. Okay, good. There's one character that we really didn't talk about enough, who I think is sort of, I don't know, a representative of the entire movie. It's Mrs. Appleyard.
Oh, yeah.
This lady starts off as sort of typical Victorian era 1900 girl school, marm, right? Then she goes a little bit off the rocker. What do you guys make of this person? Is she reacting? Is she going along with the movie? Is she going against the movie? How did you feel about Mrs. Appleyard?
She turns herself into royalty by the end of it. I'm just remembering the dinner scene where she's talking with Miss McCraw, was it? And she's just got this big old get-up. Her hair is bigger than ever. And it's really interesting how she... I really didn't know what to make of her at first, because I was expecting her to end up the villain, which she is, but I just not in the way that she transformed from beginning to end of the movie.
I will say that as somebody who pays into a homeowners association, it doesn't matter how small the group of people is. If you're at the top, you will go insane. You will just if you're in charge, you will just absolutely go crazy.
And also, she's almost like sort of a ghost in a way, in that she, if the central question of the movie is what happens to these young women, not just the ones who disappear, but all young women, what happens to them, then part of the answer might be some of them become Mrs. Appleyard. She outlives her husband. Her duty was to be a wife, and she had this period where she was living the perfect version of the life that society had allowed for her. But then this dude dies, and it's like, well, now what can I do? And she's got like 3 options, and one of them is open up a school, even if she's totally ill-suited to it. But there's not a lot of stuff that she can do. And then she spends all her time looking backwards into the past, into when the very small sliver of time where she was able to do exactly what society wanted and to still be happy at the same time. Now she is stuck in a world where she can do what society wants, but it's going to make her so freaking miserable.
Yeah,
she doesn't want to like live with these girls. She doesn't care for them.
Do you know what it is,
that's
too?
totally understandable.
What it is this basically explains Boomer is that she has one skill set, and that's belligerently following rules. And if people grow or if society changes, that takes away your skill set, or even worse than that, sort of makes it seem like you were wasting your time in the past, and that makes people absolutely incensed.
I mean, if part of your training as a girl was you were told when you could take off your gloves, and if you were constantly made to feel like your only role was to land a husband, I could definitely see becoming embittered later in life when you are then told, okay, now you have to fend for yourself. And you're like, well, I guess I could be the one who tells the girls they can't take their gloves off until they get through town. Otherwise, like, what's the thing I can do? I can't go open a business, any other type of business. I can't go enter into politics. Like, I either can die or get sauced up, which she starts doing when things fall apart, or I can open this shitty school in this shitty place, and that sucks too. But it's something, and I have to do something.
I feel like a lot of the options at the time for divorced, or not divorced, of course not. They couldn't get divorced.
That's disgusting. You would even say that word.
Yeah, of course. So I feel like the only options at the time was go none or go home. Like there's nothing else for you.
And what she doesn't understand, or what she does, but she's trying to fight against, and I think that every generation goes through this, is that nature finds a way. You can't stop the volcano. You can't put a cap on the Coke bottle with the Mentos in it. Like, these girls, the repression only lasts so long before they either bust out of it and become normal people, or they just explode into a portal. All right, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to give this movie some awards. We have 3 Moody's to give out. The first one, we're going to start with you, Greg, is cringiest moment.
Okay, now, did this win any Oscars, Ryan?
I actually don't think so.
No.
I don't think it was a big deal until much later.
I don't think it did. This is a movie maker's movie. I feel like you could see a lot of like people like influences on modern movies in this one. But I'm supposed to pick cringiest moment. You know, the movie does mostly okay, I want to say, except this is supposed to be like the story of all of Australia, and there is one native person in it. There's one Aboriginal person in it, and he's referred to as an Abo by one of the guys. And so that I thought was like, he barely even made it into the movie, and then he was kind of something like sideways was said about him.
Was Abo the band that wrote Mamma Mia?
No.
Keep going. You can keep going. Sorry.
But yeah, so that was my cringy moment.
When I do these shows with you, Greg, I also take note of the POC, and I think that this is very purposeful. I think that they're left as a mystery as well, because I think Weir is leading you into thinking, oh, I bet it was those Aboriginals, I think that it's purposeful to leave them out, so they're part of the mystery as well, which is not an excuse.
That's gross too, yeah. And the guy is dressed in such an interesting like garb. I think that there's an interest there. Like, if you're telling the story of Australia, why not tell the story of those people? And it just like it felt like almost emphasizing that they weren't being included. But yeah, I think that all Australian stories in a way are sort of colonial stories, So this sort of was like, look what happens when we take this land over. The land is going to take it back. And it doesn't back it up. But Van, what was cringiest moment for you?
Mine was a technical note. Right before that group of girls goes into like the cliffs for the very first time, there was just a lot of overlays with just women's faces and rocks and birds, and I just thought there could have been something better done there. I get you're trying to have this like dreamy sort of like dreamscape aspect to this, and I thought that was just, I would say overdone, but this is probably one of the first art house just annoying.
This is probably very
influential
influential to the things that annoy you now. My cringiest moment is it's most often with the two guys when they're sitting around drinking, talking about or not talking about how the girls disappeared. They just don't do anything about the bugs on them, and that freaks me out. Like, just buy like a lantern or something, like a bug zapper. Greg.
Yeah, buy a lantern and a bug zapper in 1900.
Yeah. Well, go through the portal, become a crab.
The portal's right there.
Take it back.
It's half a day's journey to the portal. You just make sure you get there straight up noon.
We'll give that one to Greg. Van, director's signature moment. Peter Weir.
I liked at the very beginning, you see him doing a lot of montages of showing everyday life I referenced Dead Poets again, so I really enjoyed just seeing the girls in their everyday lives just in the quick snapshots. I thought that was very reminiscent of Peter Weir.
And I didn't watch this movie a second time, but that when you watch it a second time, you're like, oh, there's the whole movie played out in that scene. Oh, this is developing everything I should have been paying attention to. Greg, director signature?
For me, when I think Peter Weir, I think of Master and Commander. Everybody agrees Master and Commander is a great movie. Why did we only get one of those? Come on, more Master and Commanders. But part of what Master and Commander does so well is it talks about not necessarily the homosexual relationship between its two main male leads, Captain Jack Aubrey and Stephen Maturin.
Damn, you do love that movie.
I've read some of the books too. But it certainly has there's a homoerotic quality to their love for each other. They're basically a same-sex married couple, and it's just you don't ever see them have sex, but they function as a married couple. And I felt very much that vibe coming off Michael and Birdie. And the one particular shot I would give it to is Michael's like, I'm going to go back out on to hang and rock. And Birdie's like, I just don't think about things, so try not to worry about it. And then the next morning, Birdie comes out, and Michael's in this really jaunty little hat and a capelet over his shoulder. And Birdie comes out, and they make eye contact, and the eye contact is so... It's romantic. They're just very, very, they're kind of glowing with each other. And without it being a super sexual thing, there's obviously two men in love. And that one moment I thought was so sweet between those guys. And it was very Master and Commander to me.
Do you know how I take that? I take that as love is not important to Peter Weir, the director, but it's important to the person. So even though he doesn't focus on it, it just comes out of him.
Yeah.
He's just beaming with it. My director signature was, I think he does this incredible job. And this is, due to the list of movies that we've gone over a couple times of putting a stranger in a strange land, putting someone who doesn't belong but not hanging a lantern on it, not doing these, shooting it or having the dialogue in such a way where isn't this weird that we're here? I don't know. I didn't notice for a long time that it is weird for these girls to be out in the wilderness until it was far too late. And I think that happens obviously in Witness, but definitely in Truman Show. We'll give that one to Van. I haven't watched it a second time, but when I do, I will more emphatically give that to you. The final award is pound for pound performance. Definitely an ensemble piece.
Yeah.
Greg, who stood out to you?
It would be too cliche to say the hanging rock. I mean, that's the titular, right? But obviously a solid performance there. But for me, it is the actress that played Sarah, Margaret Nelson. There's so much kind of out there weird acting in this that I really, really like. But she has such a grounded, centered performance as somebody who just lost the love of their life. To be that age and to be in love and to have that person just disappear, it's so devastating. And to watch that go through her in waves and to just watch how if you're obsessed with a missing girl, there's a missing girl right here. It's her. She's disappearing from the world right now, and nobody cares because you can see her, but she's obviously drifting away from everybody. Somebody go save her. She's the one that's right here. And I think that so much of it is the performance of Margaret Nelson that really just is so stark and real.
Well, give him the award like right now because I couldn't have stated that any better.
There's a missing girl right here.
Yeah.
Van, you're not going to beat that.
No, I really can't. No, I would have gone with Margaret Nelson as Sarah, but otherwise Rachel Roberts as Mrs. Appleyard I thought did great. I enjoyed her performance a lot, and I believed her very much. But no, absolutely, this award goes to Margaret Nelson.
What was Appleyard's name?
It was Rachel Roberts.
Yeah.
Rachel Roberts does such a good job of walking that balance beam of, like, I'm not crazy, you're crazy, until the very end. I'm going to, I guess this is pointless because Greg just got the award, but
Yes.
I'm going to give it to Jackie Weaver, who plays, I think, Minnie, the French maid lady, who's just always walking into rooms going, like, what the hell is going on here? And it's not even just about, like, portals and mountains. It's, like, literally every time something's crazy, she comes in and she's like, do you guys see how you're acting right now? A little dumb, a little comedic relief, but still, I thought exactly what the movie needed for all of those moments. But I guess Greg takes it down. Guys, Picnic at Hanging Rock is not in the bracket, but do you kind of wish it was?
Now that we have done the show about it, I guess I wish that it could be in contention, but I'm just glad we got a chance to see it and talk about it. I think that there are definitely movies in the bracket that it could take, but it doesn't fully feel like a winner to me, but it definitely was like deserving of at least a bonus show.
I think the reason that like it suckered us in, right? Like I'm really glad that it's the three of us for this show and not like plebeians like Mike, is that it's such an open text. Like, we could probably do another hour easily. And I think that people forget that when they hear foreign film, they hear foreign language film.
Yeah, dang.
And this is in English, but it's definitely foreign because it does allow itself to be an open text. Even though 1975 was this cultural revolution and movies were changing so hardcore, a lot of the American movies that we watch for 1975 are sort of open and shut.
Yeah.
And this movie just has so many paths that you can take as far as thinking about it and talking about it. Van, do you agree with that?
I'm gonna say something I thought I'd never say, but I rewatched at least half of Nashville, and I was thinking about the rewatchability of this film, and I liked it, I enjoyed it. Now that I gave Nashville a second watch, because I was kind of feeling the same, like, slice of life, that same kind of just shot and story, that sort of, like, structure there. But I really don't think it could measure up, because now I am learning more about Nashville and all that, so I just don't think it would make it into the top movies because I've only had, like, a sample of what 1975 has to offer. So I don't think it would be up there in the running, but I did very much enjoy it.
Yeah, I just... it's so hard, especially because of where we were born and the movies that we grew up on, to, I've seen a million movies from the 70s, and to just be like, yeah, I'm going to sit down and watch this plotless movie, it's still so hard. It's still so hard to, like, just understand that it's not going to be story fed to you. But I think this movie crushes it.
And it's like jazz. It, like, basically is like, man, we're not showing you what kind of crazy stuff is going on, but can't you just imagine what kind of crazy stuff might be going on?
Yeah.
And it's kind of like it puts it on you to imagine what interesting things are happening. That's a bold choice.
And if you listen to jazz and you wonder what crazy stuff is going on, listen to 90s pop punk. I think that answers all the questions for you.
Usually I think the crazy thing is it's just a saxophone. You're just hearing a saxophone. It's a bad sounding instrument. It's not that crazy.
It's not good. It's not musical.
No.
Like, I don't.
And what you imagine? What if I were not?
I like a good saxophone.
What if I were not hearing?
That's an
saxophone?
oxymoron. The best.
Oh, come on!
The best saxophone I've ever heard is when I saw a saxophone player with the saxophone in his case fall down the stairs, and I was just, that's what I like to hear.
You are cruel. You are mean.
Saxophone players, get out of here. You're not musicians.
You're gonna lose listeners.
We have so much to do left in 1975. We've got One Flew coming up. We've got Shampoo coming up. We've got Solo coming up. Our Solo show has still not come out, so there's still a lot to go. But that was Picnic at Hanging Rock. Van, tell us where we can find you.
You can find me at s.v.mb on Instagram, but that's all I've got to plug for today.
And Greg?
I'm at Pensive Gorilla on Twitter, or you can find me sitting in the office in my house.
Like right now?
Honestly, so much of the time, Ryan. So much of the time, right in this same room.
And what is that address?
No. 123 Real Street, Anytown, USA.
That is Greg's address. For Greg, I am Van. For Van, I am Ryan. For Greg, I am also Ryan. Thank you so much for listening, and keep watching them movies.